Hello and welcome to the 85th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. So, today and the coming weeks, I will go into a DTM perspective on the history of Western philosophy. But before I go there, as usually, let's have a recap of the last week geopolitical events. And one is obviously what we follow, what Trump is doing, and it became clear last week that when he struck a deal with Yemen through Oman to stop the attacks on Yemen, it was clear that he couldn't achieve anything there. So they are losing $1 billion in the whole operation. Ansarallah from Yemen gets advanced weapons from Iran, and in any escalation, sooner or later, the US warships would be attacked. They lost a few planes, and Trump is seeing that this might develop into a larger war, which he wants to avoid at all costs. So the war rhetoric that comes out of the radical camp within the Trump administration, who engineered the attack on Yemen, they are losing ground. We don't know for how long, maybe they come back, but as far as I can see now, I don't see Trump um, getting any results of his threats on Iran or Yemen. And the same goes for Ukraine. Trump had a tremendous opportunity to attend the Victory Day celebrations in Russia, but he didn't go there. And the Victory Day celebration in Russia was a huge success for Putin and for Russia. It showed that the world order is being shaped with players outside of the West. The Ibrahim Traore from Burkina Faso, stole many hearts when he spoke Russian in his introduction. Trump's policy, Ukraine policy is in shambles. They're going to talk in Turkey now, but we'll see how that goes. And obviously, the last week the biggest thing was the India-Pakistan war. Now, people ask me what is my position on this war? Who do I take sides with? And I answer from a DTM perspective, we never take sides with governments who are repressive. In Pakistan, you have a repressive government. In India, Modi government is a repressive government. We don't take sides when these governments fight. We take sides with the people. And it's clear the people don't benefit from war. And the solution for Kashmir is not a military solution. And a religious war is the worst war possible because it leads inevitably to genocide. So what is the solution? I argue we need a political solution, joint cooperation for economic, social, and cultural development of the region, and creating the condition for a lasting solution to be depended by the people in the future. So I think we should call on the people from Pakistan and India to stop supporting their government and supporting people to people cooperation, setting up plans for the joint economic, social, and cultural development of Jammu and Kashmir, make sure that all the repressive things that India is doing in Kashmir and support that Pakistan gives to terrorists. The latest attack where people went into the bus, asked people for their religion, whether they're Hindu, and then execute them. This is a horrible thing. And this is supported by Pakistan. And the repression of then all Kashmiris by the Indians, this is fomenting a forever war. And our position is how to create a better world, not how to side with governments who are in a perpetual war. And I think arguing for a new cooperation on social, economic, and cultural development of the region in a joint cooperation between India and Pakistan is the way to go forward. So I'm going to talk about decolonizing the discipline of philosophy. My book, Decolonizing the Mind, deals with different disciplines. And sometimes people ask me, how can you talk about philosophy and natural science and mathematics? Uh, where do you get this knowledge, and are you sure about the things you're saying? Now, I've been studying science for 55 years. Since I was a kid, from 15 years old, I love reading books. I read a lot every day. And the last 12 years, I've been focusing on writing the DTM book. I have a digital library of 48,000 books in English, so it's very limited because obviously there are billions of books out there. I love to talk to experts in fields, which I often do. Now with AI, you have an expert in AI, which is the greatest research assistant you can have. I keep an access database of citations of the books I read and the quotes I can take so for references when I write something. Only on philosophy, my digital library have 1,200 books. Obviously, I haven't read them all, but I scan through them and I go through them to get an idea, and obviously some of them I just study more in depth. Now, how to decolonize the discipline is the biggest topic in decolonial theory, and in the field of philosophy, a lot of work has been done already by many scholars. So with DTM, I provide a specific framework that looked at decolonizing the discipline in three steps. We critique Eurocentrism, we critique the discipline of the Eurocentrism views of that discipline. We reconstruct the discipline with alternatives from other civilizations and creativity, and we look into the practical implications of new knowledge. The three things is what you come all the time when we talk about DTM. This is a DTM framework, all the three things. So, why is philosophy so important? Because it's a foundation for other disciplines. And it's a foundation of a civilization, because knowledge production and knowledge, the views of a civilization on how to look at knowledge, the ethical foundation, the knowledge foundation, this all comes from philosophy. That's why it's important to study philosophy. My earliest book, which I read, decades ago, was on the history of Western philosophy, was by Bertrand Russell, The History of Western Philosophy. I enjoyed reading the book, which consists of three parts: ancient philosophy, Catholic philosophy, and modern philosophy. There have been many textbooks. I'll just show you a few of them and their content. One 9-volume book by Frederick Copleston, has the same format: Greece, Rome, medieval, Renaissance, late medieval, and then modern philosophy from the 7th to the 19th century, and the 20th century philosophers. Grayling, The History of Philosophy, has one part, follows the same model, but has an additional part on Indian, Chinese, Arabic, Persian, and African philosophy, which is a good thing. I have a lot of textbooks and manuals on these philosophies from different civilizations: Indian, Chinese, Persian, Islamic, African, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain philosophy, which I when it comes to logic, was one of the main things which I enjoyed. So then, very popular, Anthony Kenny's History of Western Philosophy. I've written a couple of books on the history of Western philosophy. I just took one, which is an illustrated brief history, following the same model: ancient philosophy, medieval, Renaissance, modern, and the 20th century. So let's see how they look at philosophy, how Western philosophy look at philosophy. And the textbooks always take the same. When they talk about ancient Greek philosophy, they see, they discuss pre-Socrates, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then the ancient philosophy after Aristotle. And you get a list of authors, and they go through what are they saying, what questions did they deal with, what answers did they give, uh, presuming that Greek philosophy is part of Western philosophy. Now, in the coming one of the coming videos, I'll deal with the issue whether Greek philosophy is part of Western philosophy or of African philosophy, and I'll argue that it's not part of Western philosophy at all. So they should call it not Greek philosophy but African philosophy, given the foundation where it came from and how the Greek then further developed African philosophy. That's for another episode. And then when they talk about medieval philosophy, they mostly talk about Christian theologians. The early fathers in the first 4 centuries of Christianity, Christianity was not a political power. And then the biggest names, St. Augustine, St. Benedict, St. Thomas of Aquinas, John de Scott, Boetius. I like the thing of Aquinas because very early when I studied philosophy, I came across his 5 proofs of the existence of God, which basically were derived from an Islamic philosopher, Avicenna's. But interesting how he used reason to prove the existence of God. Now, and then you get Renaissance philosophies, Machiavelli, Thomas More, Erasmus, Galileo Galilei. And then when they talk about modern philosophy, in these history books, they talk about the philosophy from the 17th to the 19th centuries. Why? Because of the rise of what they call rationalism, where people think with their head and not with other parts of their body, which is a racist proposition. And then you got the founders, Descartes, Bacon, Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Kant, Hegel, Voltaire, Rousseau, Fichte, Marx, Engels, Nietzsche. All these people come through these textbooks. They are explaining their philosophies. And then when you go to the 20th century, then you get the specific school of existentialism, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Sartre, about individual freedom, authenticity, phenomenology, study of the conscious experience. You get Heidegger, Husserl, analytical philosophy, where logic and language is central with Russell and Wittgenstein. Pragmatism, the truth as a practical utility with Peirce, James, Dewey. Critical theory, the German Frankfurter School of Adorno and Habermas. Post-structuralism and postmodernism with Foucault and Derrida. Deconstruction of the great narratives, grand narratives, and the feminist philosophy with gender, power, epistemology, Beauvoir, Butler. Post-colonial theory, critique of colonialism, Said, Spivak. This is more or less what these textbooks are dealing with. Now, and they give the branches, metaphysics, which deals with the nature of reality and existence, of being, soul, body, mind, epistemology, the study of knowledge and belief, ethics, principles of right and wrong, logic, structure of valid reasoning, aesthetic concepts of beauty and art. Now, you won't find a branch which is the colonization of the mind, which in decolonial philosophy takes a big place. So when they look at the history of Western philosophy, they don't see the colonization of the mind. When we look at it, we see that it is there. Now, when we decolonize any discipline, we first look into the definition of the discipline. The coming weeks, months, I'll go into the theoretical foundation of DTM, which was the purpose of the series, and it took over because of things happening in Palestine I spend a lot of time in discussing world history, world politics, geopolitics. But the coming months, I'll go back to the basic theoretical issues of decolonial theory. So, when we decolonize a discipline, we look at the definition of the discipline. Now, in philosophy, they say philosophy, and then they refer to Greek terms, is philosophy, the love of wisdom, Sophia, knowledge. So that is philosophy. It's study knowledge. Now, we use a Greek term. Why? Well, why? That is because of how power has been instituted in science. So the power, Western power, has imposed on the world Western science, and that is what they know. Because other civilizations also had philosophy, and they have different names. In Hindi, they call it darshan, which means to see or to perceive. Chinese, Shechui, I hope I pronounce it right, with Xie is wise and Q is study, the study of wisdom, but then they don't call it philosophy, which is Greek. So the Chinese would have another way. In Persian is falsafa, love of wisdom. So language influences a concept. I take the example of economics. If you have a Eurocentric definition of economics, it would be the study of how individuals, business, governments, and societies allocate scarce resources to satisfy unlimited wants and needs. So what do? They leave ethics out of it. But they do as if this is a universal definition. But we could have a other definition with other language, and the DTM definition of economics is the study of the production, distribution, and financing of goods and services in a just way. It takes ethics into account. Now, if you have a theory without ethics and theory with ethics, there are different studies, different research, different analytical and practical conclusions. So, as I mentioned, in the Eurocentric philosophy, they look at the individual contributions of philosophies, but they have no idea about the general line of Western philosophy because they don't link it to civilizational aspect specific to Western civilizational. They think it is universal and holds for every civilization. That's why they don't discuss the question, are there specific characteristics of Western philosophy, which is that I would argue for a DTM perspective, yes. Western philosophy has been colonized in a specific way. They don't discuss it, they don't study it, we do. So if we create a new textbook on philosophy, then that is our starting point. We don't take the chapters of these textbooks and then go through, oh, this is what Greek philosophy said, medieval, Renaissance, modern, and then the 20th century. No, our approach is we study the foundation of knowledge production in a society, in a civilization. So we position philosophy as a civilization foundation of societies. And then there are the branches, epistemology, ethics, logic, deconstructing and reconstructing knowledge, the colonization of the mind, conceptual thinking. There are similar branches like ethic and logic, but there are new branches like conceptual thinking and the colonization of the mind. So that is how a DTM philosophical textbook would look like. Now, when I propose in my book, in this lecture, what is the DTM view of the history of Western philosophy? What are the specific characteristics? I base it on contributions that decolonial scholars have made. They have a lot of great contributions that already has been done, and I use basic concept of DTM. So let me define knowledge. And I define knowledge in general as a collection of insights and understanding about the natural and social world as expressed in concepts that describe and explain certain aspects of the social and natural world. So, key thing are insight, understanding of both the natural and the social world. Another key aspect is concept. I'll deal with conceptual thinking in another video. The concept is an idea that describes and explains certain aspect of the social and natural world, and knowledge is contained in concept. So the concept is a basic unit of knowledge. The concept of the discovery of America is a different concept than the concept of the occupation of Abya. The terminology is different. What you convey, your insight about what happened in that natural and social world in the 15th century. And what's important in our definition is that knowledge is about true and false and also about right and wrong. So ethics, in our conception of knowledge, philosophy, contains both let's say plain knowledge in terms of observing and understanding natural social world, and also ethical issues about right and wrong. Now, what is the main thing that the analysis, the specific nature of Eurocentric philosophy is that in the course of the centuries, Eurocentric philosophy was limited to true and false, and ethics was removed from knowledge. And then you get the idea that science is objective. So physics, sociology are objective scientific disciplines that anybody can study anywhere in the world and get the same results and use the same concept, etc. Because it's all about true and false. And ethics is a subjective thing and doesn't belong to knowledge. It doesn't belong to philosophy. So you have to understand how was ethics removed from knowledge. And I will explain that in the coming weeks. One is that the sources of knowledge were limited to two sources, observation and reasoning. The other is that social theory was mirrored after the natural science with concepts of social and natural laws. The third is that the sole criteria for knowledge was empirical validation, so ethical validation is removed from it. Science's positions in contradiction to Christian theology, so science becomes positivist, and there's only one form of logic, true and false. So this is the critique of Eurocentric philosophy. It removed ethics from knowledge and it limited philosophy in understanding the world. So I'm going to do it in the coming weeks, but the implications are wide-reaching. It opens the door for the colonization of knowledge and the mind, and it imposes a particular Western view as universal through military, economic, political, social, and cultural power. I will go into how it was done, but it's important to understand that the basis of all sciences and civilization and philosophy is where colonization of the mind starts. And next time I'll deal with how Eurocentric philosophy became limited to only two sources of knowledge. Thank you for your attention and hope to see you next week.